What's up guys, KalipezTech here, coming back at you with another video. Today I'm going to be doing a review of the BLU G71, so let's get started. So the BLU G71 has a 6.5-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. We got a hole punch right here for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 13 megapixels. Now, even though the display is only 720p, I do think it does look really nice for what it is, and the bezels are super small, so that's good too. Overall, I do think the design looks really nice. The phone is really sleek and modern looking, and it has this nice material on the back that's kind of a matte red color, and it doesn't really pick up a lot of fingerprints. Overall, I think it looks really unique without being over the top. This phone has a really impressive amount of storage for its price range. With 64 gigabytes of internal storage and micro SD card expansion, this is probably going to be more than enough for the average user. These days, with apps getting bigger and bigger, and the system itself takes up a good deal of space too, it's important to have as much storage as you can get. It's better to have more than you need, because if you run out of storage, you can't really do a whole lot about that. Whereas if you have way more storage than you need, that's never really gonna be a problem. The only time I could really see storage being an issue on this phone is if you have a ton of photos and videos, or if you have a bunch of larger apps, most likely games with complex graphics. And in the case of photos and videos, you're gonna be able to use a micro SD card for that as well. So there really aren't too many situations with this phone where you're gonna be in danger of running out of storage. Unfortunately, this phone doesn't support wireless charging, but it does have a fingerprint scanner right here on the back, and it also has face unlock. So whichever method you prefer, you can easily use it. It's nice to have both options, just because some people prefer a fingerprint scanner, some prefer face unlock, and then there might be situations where one works out better than the other, so it never hurts to have both. I really do like these external fingerprint scanners. They might not be as fancy as an in-display fingerprint scanner, but it is really fast and works super well. We're gonna try it out real quick. There we go, one more time. And there we go. This fingerprint scanner is really fast and responsive, and you're not gonna have any problems using it. So in addition to this really nice looking front-facing camera, on the back here, we got a triple camera setup with a 13 megapixel rear camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. It's really nice to see that this phone has an ultra wide camera, especially with the quality that it is. Ultra wide cameras are becoming more and more popular, but there are a lot of phones that still don't have them. And a lot of these phones that don't have an ultra wide camera are a lot more expensive than this phone. With a decent quality ultra wide camera, this phone even has an advantage over some of those older flagship phones that were made before ultra wide cameras really became a thing. Even if a phone in this price range does have an ultra wide camera, it's usually not even very good quality. Some of them are just straight up unusable. But with this phone, as you can see here, the quality of the ultra wide camera on this phone is actually super good. There's really no distortion or warped edges or anything like that at all. It really does a good job at capturing a wider space and maintaining really good photo quality, like an ultra wide camera is designed to do. Now, this might not be a flagship quality image, but keep in mind, this is a really entry-level phone. So for what it is, I think this is really impressive. This picture was taken with the rear camera of the phone. As with the ultra wide camera, for what it is, the rear camera of this phone really does take good quality photos. I like how the colors look in this picture. They're a lot brighter and more defined than I would expect from an entry-level phone like this, and the quality is pretty good too. Overall, although I wouldn't say the photos taken by this phone are really professional quality, I do think they're really good for casual use, a social media post here and there, sending pictures to friends, just general camera use. I think it is really okay, especially considering most of the phones I've seen in this price range are quite a bit lower quality than this. As far as video goes, this phone's able to shoot in qualities up to 1080p in both the rear and the front cameras, so not bad at all. The video quality is basically going to be the same that you saw in the camera. I wouldn't say that it's really professional quality, so if you're shooting videos for any serious purpose, I wouldn't recommend using this camera for it, because even though the quality is really acceptable for casual use, you're most likely going to be disappointed if you're expecting a really professional looking video. Internally, this phone is getting 3 GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio A25 processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone and it came back with a single core score of 147 and a multi-core score of 873. So really not the most impressive numbers, especially considering there are phones that are even less expensive than this that have more processing power. You're most likely not going to be able to do a ton with this phone very comfortably. If you're using the phone for basic functions like sending text messages, making calls, doing a little web browsing, maybe some social media here and there, you're gonna be completely fine. But once you get into the realm of gaming and video editing and more high performance activities like that, this phone is gonna have some trouble, because while this processing power really isn't bad, it's a lot better than phones like the Samsung Galaxy A02, for example, that has quite a bit less power than this. It's still not going to be at the level that you need it to be in order to do those more demanding activities. Now, what this phone's lacking in processing power, it really makes up for in the battery department. With a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, you can't really get any bigger than this. You're going to have a lot of life per charge. And as far as longevity is concerned, this phone's really not going to wear out that fast. In a few years, when phones with smaller batteries like the iPhone 12, for example, that has around half the battery size as this, is going to be really starting to wear out, this phone is probably going to have quite a bit of life left in it. So if you're one of those people who prefers to get a phone and stick with it for a long time, this is going to be a really good advantage for you. So now that we've gone over some of the specs of the phone, let's take a quick look at the hardware. On the left side of the phone, we have our slot for our SIM card and micro SD card and a Google Assistant button. Now, I'm really not a big fan of the Google Assistant button. It's pretty annoying, especially for people who don't use Google Assistant, but even if you do, there are other ways to access the Google Assistant that make a lot more sense than a dedicated button. Now you can deactivate it, but it's still kind of a hassle, and I think it would have made a lot more sense if you could reprogram it to do something else besides open the Google Assistant. In that case, it might actually be really cool, but unfortunately you can't, so I think it's just a waste of space, and it makes the design a little less practical. On the bottom here, we have our speaker, a USB-C charging port, the microphone, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. On the right side here, we have the power button and the volume keys. I really like the texture of the power button. It has this rough little groove and I think it's really cool. Nothing up here at the top, and on the back here we have our fingerprint scanner and of course our camera setup. There's a blue logo here on the bottom left corner of the phone with some info about the device. Overall, I think the design is really nice looking with the thin bezels and the sleek design. It does have a modern, nicer look, and the display size is nice too. It's large enough to give you the benefits of having a bigger display, but at the same time, it's not so big that it's uncomfortable to carry in your pocket. That being said, I do think the materials could be a little better. Despite how nice the phone looks, it does feel cheap. Most of the phone is made of cheap plastic and it really has that feel to it. It doesn't feel very premium at all, which really goes against how it looks. But in conclusion, is the BLU G71 worth buying in 2021? I would say it really is, especially if you're only using your phone for basic activities like sending text messages, making phone calls, browsing the web, and going on social media. That's really what this phone is going to be super good for. Now, you're not going to get flagship high-end performance out of this phone, but the price really does reflect that. At the end of the day, even though it does have a few nicer features than some phones in its class, it is an entry-level phone, and if you're really looking for something that can do basic activities really well and be reliable down the road, then this is a good, solid option. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.